I was trying my hardest and I couldn't cash flow. I was running out of money. And it was a shift. It was a big shift for me. And so that was actually the shift where we went from just websites to marketing. Like, we are just a cost center. I want to be a revenue generating center. Like, I want to be the thing that they don't want to delay and they never want to stop.
This is Biz Ninja Entrepreneur Radio with your host, Tyler Jorgensen.
Welcome out to Biz Ninja Entrepreneur Radio. I am your host, Tyler Jorgensen. We've recently passed the 200 episode mark of the most recent version of the show, and somewhere around 400 or 500 episodes total. And today I have the honor and privilege of having one of my good and dearest friends, Matt Deseno, on the show, who is not only an entrepreneur, but a friend and mentor of mine. And so I'm super excited to have you out on the show. Finally, I feel like we've been talking about it for a couple of years. So welcome out to the show, Matt.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. It's good to be here. But yeah, it has been literally years we've been talking about doing this.
Yeah, and I was on yours, and at least we recorded it. I don't think it ever got published. So in my brain, I was like, this has happened, but it actually hasn't. It was the other way around. The first question I love to ask guests, because this show is all about the entrepreneur's journey, and is the question of, when did you first realize that you were an entrepreneur?
That's a great question. I think the identity of entrepreneur for me was something reserved in an elevated status. So I initially identified as like a freelancer, a side hustler, right? Like, I was like business inclined, but I hadn't fully identified as an entrepreneur. I think the first time it clicked for me was actually I was listening to Tony Robbins speak, and he talked through this his kind of like personality types, and he's like the artist, the manager, and the entrepreneur. And so by his definition of at least that entrepreneurial personality type was someone who loves the risk. And I realized that actually is very much so in alignment with me. Was for the sake of the possibility of like a new world, a better world, I was comfortable and excited by taking on personal and professional risks to see that possibility come to fruition.
Yeah, and that's something I've seen in you, is your ability to, one, see the upside is really, really strong. That's definitely an entrepreneurship trait. But then your willingness to actually take the risk is secondary. So in that process, you got started in the world of kind of internet marketing and agency work as more of a freelancer. Yeah. How did you make the shift? Like, maybe it wasn't about that mindset, that Tony Robbins moment, but when do you feel like there was a shift from being maybe self-employed to starting to think more like a business owner?
That's a good question. It honestly happened kind of early on. So for me, it was out of college. So I graduated and I was just running from the idea of going home. I was committed to do anything to not end up back at home. So this was 2011. And I actually didn't even fully understand, because I was in college through like the 2008 crisis and stuff like that. So it wasn't as dramatic as if it had been if I had graduated maybe a few years earlier. But so I remember it was like, well, I could, I still had a room back home. If I couldn't make it, that was this safety net, if you will. But in my mind, it's like, there's no possibility. There was no way I was going to go and take that. And so I had side hustled even during college. Really, my skill that I had, which enabled me to be a freelancer, was WordPress. I just knew websites, and I knew WordPress in particular. It was like from middle school, I took a programming class. Middle school, 8th grade, I took a programming class, and I learned how to program video games. I think we did general programming in just a range of languages there. And the first thing I made was a video game, which I called Bacon or Alive 2, because I figured I should just start with the one that's so good. We already made the sequel. People were like demanding a sequel. So I made Bacon or Alive 2, and it was you were the pig, and you were being chased by this cook that was trying to turn you into bacon. Anywho, that put the bug in me with like this creative crossover. Was like, I just had the skill. I loved programming. I loved computers. I loved computer science. And that continued in college into the practical nature of, how could I translate the skill into money? And it turned out the things that people wanted to pay for was websites. And the type of websites they wanted were WordPress, or at least that was, if at that time, this is 2009, 2010, what they were describing. I was like, oh, well, there's this content management system. It's called WordPress. This is kind of exactly what you're looking for. And so from freelancing and basically taking jobs off of Craigslist. So as a college student taking jobs off of Craigslist, they say, I need a website. I'm like, I'll do it. to graduating. And I looked out there in the market and I saw there was one other, I went to school in Malibu, and there was one other agency, and they had a little form you could fill out and they would literally give you all their prices. And I saw the lowest website they would do was 10 grand. And I thought that felt like so much money to me. And so I decided my price is half that. Because if someone could pay me $5,000 for a website, like, I am living good. At the time, right, I had 4 or 5 roommates. We had a 2-bedroom condo, and we would put 4 or 5 guys in this 2-bedroom condo. And my rich life looked like being able to surf, eat breakfast burritos, and just kind of live like the after college lifestyle of like, it's like if, I wanted to be fun employed. And so the opportunity to kind of freelance and side hustle, gave me that ability. And so I just was really fortunate with the connections that I made. But after a year, I remember I did it for a year. I had kind of like a revenue goal or an earning goal in my mind. This was my rich, like unfathomable earnable amount was $100,000. Which I know for a lot of people, like still today, actually, that's still like a marked earning point for folks. And I think because I just built business off of being like, I'm not going to be fancy. I'm just going to do what I say I'm going to do when I say I'm going to do it. And that was enough to get referrals. And you deconstruct it and you're like, 20 customers is not a lot, right? In other businesses, you're like, 20 customers is not that extravagant,
A year? Yeah, no. It's not
In
not
a year.
a huge number. Yeah.
And that was the goal. It's like, if I could do 20, because I was like $5,000 my price, because I'm just going to be half the price of the other guy down the street. And so I'll just lowball him. I'll charge half. I'll kind of get paid to learn.
You'll eat all of the breakfast burritos. Like there's none left.
I'll live so good. And what I say, like getting paid to learn, I got paid to learn the business side of it. Like I didn't know what it looks like for client management, I got better at setting expectations, but I remember I used to do these giant paper contracts. We were in person. Like it doesn't feel that long ago. I literally printed contracts we would sign in person, signed paper contracts. I'm like, I got to file this stuff away. Registering the business. So I identified as a freelancer for all intents and purposes. I started a business, and still now it's like technically, like when did I file for the EIN number and formulate the business? It was 2012, February of 2012, started the business. And that was 6 months after I graduated. And that was the shift from like, I'm not going to just be a side hustler. This is going to be a real thing. This is going to be an entity that can like make money. And very shortly afterwards, I remember thinking that there were people who were further from the water than I was that would do almost my exact same job for a dramatic fraction of what I was making. So I was like, I could outsource the entirety of what I could do by just hiring an employee. And so this was a little bit of like an arbitrage mindset, but it just like, I just realized I was like, well, people I'm in Malibu, this is really expensive. I have to split a condo with 4 guys. It's like, there are people in Oklahoma that pay the same rent that we do for a full house. And they do everything that I'm doing here for $40,000 for the year. Right. And so that was the shift there, and kind of moved into a little bit more of a business mindset. Initially, it was just that I wanted to buy back my time. Yeah. I just wanted to have more time to surf.
And that really is the difference between being self-employed and a business owner, is realizing that you're disconnected from time. Like that time isn't the lever anymore that you want to pull. So this can almost sound like it was perfect, right? Like, oh my gosh, yeah. So you graduated college, you timed it perfectly where you were in college during the recession. You graduated right when the economy starts to recover. You start selling expensive websites. You get all the breakfast burritos you want. What was the first time that you hit a wall, hit a challenge?
Yeah.
And then how'd you overcome it?
Because I had like dumb young luck. And I've seen other folks too. Like there's folks like, heck, I would have been even luckier if I had been like, I'm going to go into real estate, right? And I've seen folks now that have like boomed out because they were like, they bought their first house in 2011 or whatever it is. And you're like, oh, I'm such a genius. Like, no, it's lucky. So I was lucky, genuinely lucky. There was an uptick there. And so I just kind of rode that. I got married in 2014 and we bought our first house in 2015. And I say, I'm a good spender, and my wife is a very skilled spender. And so we went shopping for our first house, and we wanted to buy the place that needed no work. I mean, I didn't really want to buy that. I'm actually pretty handy. My dad was a drywaller, so I have like, house repair skills. And I was like, I want to fix her up. She's like, no, I want no work needed. So we bought the house that needed no work, basically overpaid. We overpaid for it, and then proceeded to like redo every aspect of the house. Like at first it was like, well, we're doing it, we may as well redo the carpets. Like carpets are never like really clean, like even if you clean them. So you got to do the carpets. Well, the carpets are up, you may as well paint. Maybe we're going to paint anyways. Well, we got to paint. Well, we're painting. You're probably going to get paint on like the bathroom floors. So you may as well redo the bathroom. Oh, if you're doing the bathroom floors, you may as well do the cabinets. If you're doing the cabinets, you may as well do the showers. And so it cascaded into this huge home renovation. We didn't even move in for like 3 months. So we bought this place and just did work on it for 3 months after we shopped around for the house that needed no work. But what was happening at this time was I was living in this, everything had been up and to the right.
Mm-hmm.
I just continued to make more money, add more team members, make more money, add more team members, make more money. And it's funny to look back and think, I didn't look for advice. I had no network of other entrepreneurs. I was just in my own world thinking that like, I don't think I said this to myself on a day-by-day basis, but it's like, I'm just a genius. I just go out there and you do it and deals happen. We had stumbled in, like we were lucky in the early days. There was a service or company called Thumbtack,
Mm-hmm.
which just was like a group shopping platform. You could go in there and be like, I need a website. I remember in these days, I set my monthly budget at $1,000. Like that was actually the most they would let me set. I was like, I'll pay $1,000 a month. I'll take every lead that you give me, because I had found a place where we were paying $10 to acquire a customer for $5,000 websites. And more than that. Like we were like, then we were starting to, go the prices. So there were some unique early seasons, things that had just happened there with some innovations that I honestly kind of did stumble into. I didn't learn it from anybody. I didn't ask for advice. But so I was going through this period, and for whatever reason, probably my attention being pulled at the house, we came into Q4 and everything turned into, this looks great. This proposal is awesome. Remember the big written out proposal? We take all this time to do it. We'll get started January. We'll get started January. I remember like there was, it just felt like a series of them, like 30 proposals from October to, December. 2 of them started, and like 28 of them were like, we'll start in January. And so I had a cash flow issue. And for the first time in my life, I couldn't pay off all our debts. And like, I'm torn between, I've got like employee obligations. We've got our own expenses, right? Because we were buying furniture, and I'm learning about things like restoration hardware. I didn't even know that was a thing, but that's like apparently my wife's favorite. And so we're buying stuff, and I thought like, oh, this is going to be fine. Like I have that positive trait, and I was like, this is not being fine. And so we got to this point where I felt like I was like net worth 0. I felt like we bought this house that wasn't even worth it just happens, summer to winter, there's a little dip there anyway. So it was like the house isn't even worth what we put into it. The business can't support its own infrastructure. We couldn't pay our personal stuff. And so it's weird to say, I was still young then, but like for the first time in my life, I couldn't be a deadbeat with debt. And I had this, I didn't realize it at the time, but I had a limiting belief that if I ever ran out of money, I'd become the worst version of my father. And so that was strangely traumatizing, this experience of feeling like everything, I was trying my hardest and I couldn't cash flow. I was running out of money. And it was a shift. It was a big shift for me. And so that was actually the shift where we went from just websites to marketing. I remember saying like, we need to be doing something that people don't want to delay. And so I would say like, I thought of it like in accounting terms, like we are just a cost center. I want to be a revenue generating center. Like I want to be the thing that they don't want to delay and they never want to stop, because we were doing good work, but it was all it was very shoppy. It was like, oh, need a website? There's your website. Have a good life. Need a website? Yep. Need a website? Have a good life. And so that was a shift from 2015 to 2016 where I was like, I got to learn marketing, and I've got to figure out how to provide stuff that people don't want to delay paying.
I feel like there is so much that an entrepreneur learns the first time they hit that scarcity, right? For some people, it's losing everything. For some people, it's just realizing that you could, right? Like it had been up and to the right up until that point. So you hadn't even thought that maybe this might stop. Maybe the gravy train may run out of fuel, right? And just being faced with that, I feel like we learned so much about ourselves. And you learned a lot of like fears, things that you didn't want to have happen, but then you also found the resilience to create a solution. So you make a shift, and now in the company, you start shifting more towards marketing. How did that go? How was implementing that? Did it go smoothly?
No, it never goes as smooth as you imagine. So actually implementing, we did some stuff initially that worked well. It was painful, but I chose short-term pain for long-term stability. So we started doing, I knew I was consciously deferring cash flow. So I started making all of our proposals 2-year contracts. So they were, I found that I could raise the price of what we do for a website because I would actually say you only have to pay a monthly fee. So you take someone who, whatever, might have said they have a $5,000 website, and I could get them to pay $900 a month for this and do a lease to own, is what we called it, a lease to own website. And so, we're pushing now to try and take their $5,000 budget and turn it into a, $10,000 budget, $12,000 budget over the course of 2 years. And so I was intentionally saying I'll take deferred cash flow. And so it caused us to be creative about how we fulfilled, to have better processes. We started honestly implementing more templatized systems, which is like a best practice anyways in the service world, but it's hard. It's so unintuitive when you want to do a good job. We have this early belief that good work, quality work has to be the hardest way. And it's so funny because the things that we really enjoy and love and the businesses that we want to emulate are usually not that way. They're not rebuilding it every single time, right? I buy a Tesla and I appreciate that's not the first Tesla they've ever made. I appreciate that I have all of the experience of the tens of thousands of versions and cars that came before it, so that mine actually has less error. It's more predictable.
Yeah.
It's still
and
a high-end
that if you have
product.
an issue, you can go get a stock part to repair
Exactly.
instead of it being
You can
everything
find,
custom.
You can find some output there. And so I just it was just a early service provider belief that you think that the best version I can give to someone is something that's custom, bespoke. And I think that's a fallacy. I think it's an early fallacy that we compensate. The stories we tell ourselves are compensating for our lack of skill in building out good systems. So we tell ourselves, well, actually, I shouldn't take the time to learn how to build better systems because that would lower the quality of my product. When I actually think it's a reverse relationship there.
So you guys make this big change, right? What did you learn about yourself as you shifted through this resilient, kind of mapped out this next step? I mean, you had to probably grow as a leader. To be able to work with your team, what challenges and what'd you learn from all that?
The first thing in that season, I capped the team at 10 folks. We got to and stayed at around 10. The reason for that is that's about the capacity that I had to manage folks. So I was acting as a manager. We can say business owner, but I was really manager. I was owner manager, right? I was the manager. It was a hub and spoke model. Everybody reported to me. I was project manager. I was customer relationship manager. I was sales and still on that piece, and we just had specialists around me. So I might have not been the one building the websites or doing the graphic design or doing the copy or doing some other tasks around, even in the marketing. I wasn't the one connecting all the pieces together, auditing the reports every day, but I was still the manager. I was the single manager, and that's why we capped at 10 folks, because that was about my capacity. And I remember thinking, I can't manage more. I couldn't imagine managing more than 10 folks. So this is good. This is a good size. And so it wasn't bad in that season, but that was a real constraint that I learned, is my capacity there. It was a couple of years later where I heard that for the first time, that your business will only grow as much as you do. And it hit me. And I realized that's exactly right. I had stifled our potential for growth because of an area that I said, I'm not going to grow. And so that was kind of an eye-opening experience in that process of growth. There's a lot of things that I had to learn through trial and error. I hired a number of folks that were friends and family. This just happens, you're like, who do I want to work with? My friends and family. And so I'm going to go out and get them. I was very fortunate. I think I've just had a preoccupation for relationship. I take a little bit wider look and zoomed out when I evaluate the decisions I'm making. And as I zoom out and think, how would I judge what I'm doing today in terms of decades from now? I come to a relationship first conclusion. So I actually have great relationships with all of them. We still maintain great friendships, great relationships. It actually transitioned really well. For the majority of them no longer work for the company. But if I go at it from a shrewd business owner evaluation, it was suboptimal in terms of how we could perform, because I wasn't holding them to the standard that the positions probably needed to be held to. And so I was creating solutions to work around their lack of ability rather than saying, I need to have someone in here who can play better. Right. And so this was the shift of the mindset from business as family. I remember hearing this too, of like, there's a legacy in American, probably small world, just the world of business in general. Most businesses started from family. Like, if I'm going to be a baker, who am I going to employ? My kids. Why do I have kids? So I can have more employees. And so that legacy of family business is inherited. And so as you're starting a business, you feel that. Like, you don't understand why, but you feel this pressure to like treat these people like family. What happens with family? When families, people that you love in your life struggle to perform whatever it is, you create a support system around them. Instead, I think it's a healthier approach to think of business like a team. And if you look at like sports teams, what happens? If someone gets injured, we lament them for like a week, but they're cut, they're gone. They're not starting anymore. It's like, it's a shame for them. Their career might be done and gone, right? But the team takes priority over the individual player. And that's really hard to do when you've got friends and family, to look at them and say, like, you're not a fit here. You're not actually an asset to the team. And so I need to bench you. And that might mean letting you go. And so you look at like the very shrewd business owners that some of us emulate because of their business success. And they're usually a little bit better at that, of prioritizing team success over the individual. And I'm inclined to be so people focused that was harder for me to do. I think I've gotten a little bit better as I've matured and had more experience in it, probably because I've learned that I think the best serving like a great human experience is one where you can do incredible work. And if you're not performing well in your current position, it's probably better for you to move on and find a place where you can do amazing work rather than kind of like limp along in this place where you're not serving the company well. And you're not I just seen like awesome folks that go from like I got fired from here, but then I had time or space or pressure to do and find something I loved doing. And because I loved doing it, I did it excellently. And you're like, the world benefits from that. You operating your excellence benefits the world way more than me, not handicapping you, but like, insulating you from the consequences of not doing excellent work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've watched you do that and process that. And I think it's really powerful because there are people who err too far on both sides, right? Mm-hmm. Too far where they just give people amazing grace, and so far to the side where it's only process or company focus that they forget that they are humans you're dealing with. I think you do a great job balancing that. So I'm looking at your timeline, right? I'm looking at your, 2011, 2005 to 2015, this starts happening. And along that timeline, you said you didn't really have mentors or even a network of business owners you talk to. But I know now that's really important to you. So how did you make that shift, and where did you start looking for mentorships and networks and things like that? And then where did you find it? And what advice would you have for people who are looking to do that?
Yeah. So for me, it was 2016. So when we said, hey, I want to do marketing, now I knew I was entering a world that I didn't know. And in the pursuit of that world, we were looking for different tools. I stumbled upon ClickFunnels. So that's when I discovered the world of ClickFunnels. You got the plaques behind you, I got the plaques behind me. And so the interesting thing is this is a tool. That's where I found it too. I was literally looking at like lead pages, and we're like, this is not flexible. And we're like programmers, like, is there like a landing page builder where I can put my custom code on it? And you just like Google that and you search around, you're like, oh, ClickFunnels was the solution. So I found ClickFunnels. Turns out it was an incredibly great marketing educational company. Like that's not their primary focus, but I'd say like that's what they do uniquely better than a lot of other companies. So they've got a tool, but they're incredible at marketing education and community. They have kind of grown up and been a unicorn in their space because they compete on community and education. And so that was my first introduction to this idea of being surrounded and being with other business owners that are learning and growing and doing and challenging this sort of thing. And so that was honestly like so much of actually what I've experienced now has been a legacy of that. Like I didn't get pulled into, there were other companies doing a similar thing, even in the marketing space. You go like, why didn't I end up at like digital marketer or, these other, I just didn't, and it's because we went tool first into ClickFunnels, and that was the world that I got looped into. So experiencing their events, their kind of coaching, their community, their masterminds, like doing that. I had no context for that, even as a possibility. And yeah, it was just randomly from totally tool driven,
Yeah.
led me into
That's
that
how
space.
that's how I found ClickFunnels as well. Is looking for this tool,
Yeah.
and then realizing their education and community were powerful. What
Yeah.
advice do you have for people that are like maybe they're a little bit farther behind in the business side of things and they're looking for a network and a community?
I think it's there if you look for it. So I literally was not looking for it. And what I'd encourage you to do, like I appreciate it and loved, and I'm still, I mean, frankly, I'm still in Russell's inner circle. So I ascended the entire value ladder and I'm still there, and I pay him, a ton of money every single day. Like this is on his top tier. Is it? I think it's $250,000 a year. So I'm not the top tier, but we're still in the place of like, I could buy a home or I buy a mastermind, and in it for multiple years. Like I buy the mastermind. What I'd encourage some folks, if they're new on, is go specific. Find, like, if you don't know the who, like just imagine, where do I want to be in whatever category it is. And I think the most valuable experiences here are folks that are just a couple steps ahead of you. And so like, I'd say like, it wouldn't even make sense, even if I had the money. I could have prioritized. I could have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on a mastermind back then, but it wouldn't have been as meaningful. I needed to have the growth and the lessons learned to get even something out of that room. And so early on, ironically, there's just more that you need because you're still learning things like how to take action. A lot of us, we hear the things we're supposed to do, we just don't do it. That's a skill. That's a skill to acquire, is the ability to take action in an area that you do not feel 100% confident in. And like learning through doing. This is the ready, fire, aim, right? This is a skill in entrepreneurship that could apply to every industry, but you need to acquire that. And so you don't need to invest a ton of money to acquire that. So I'd say find someone who is doing what you want to do, or has done what you're currently doing and done it in a way that you would love to emulate, and just search through proximity. And you can find these kind of groups, mastermind, coaching spaces where you can experience the benefit of growth and community. It's actually, if I can just say, it's fascinating, our human capacity. But if you distill it down, our brains, who we are as people, is a contained environment, right? So the decisions I make, the things that I know to do and that I do, are the sum of all the inputs I've had. If I just lived myself in a room, I'd be done growing. And so we have this weird thing, like our brains literally reprogram based on other inputs, specifically from people, in a different way. And so this is where it's the beauty of books. It's the beauty of like an actual in-person mastermind. So it's an awesome thing that like you don't have to do business alone. So you can read awesome books, you can talk to people, you can experience in this way. But of that engagement experience, just like a people experience, like what's the kind of most connected experiences you have with people? It's in person. And so if you can get yourself in person, those kind of reconfigurations for your brain to like choose and do different actions will happen in maybe a way that they couldn't happen any other way. Like that's uniquely only possible in person. And so
there is something in person coming up that I think people should be aware of, right? February 2nd and 3rd. There is a room that if you are looking for a community, you may want to be a part of. You want to tell us about that?
If you're in SoCal, I'll say it's going to be a good event anyway. So like my focus, we didn't really talk about like what we're doing now today, but like the shift over the years, I got to give credit. Like I was in ClickFunnels world and I thought it was brilliant. All of this education community, all of it was around a software tool. As far as the businesses that I've been most excited by and most bullish towards, and the ones that I've enjoyed growing, it has been software platforms. So SaaS, which is a software as a service, which is kind of like the recurring software model. It stands for software as a service. It's interesting because you can find a lot of service solutions, which are intuitive to us. But if you can design and create a solution that's based on software, it's uniquely brilliant and phenomenal, because you could have 1,000 customers tomorrow and not lose an ounce of sleep, because you've got a infinitely scalable, or a way more easy scalable solution out there in the marketplace. So we run an event called SaaS Launch Live, which is all around launching a software platform, a SaaS company, and a lot of the lessons that I've learned and taken from. I remember there was this mantra, Russell Brunson, who CEO of, co-founder of ClickFunnels, they'd say like, do what Russell says. And I remember hearing, I was like, that was great. You're like, yeah, I want to take the education, I want to put it into action. But I was like, I want to do what Russell does. And that's ultimately what he does, is he
Yeah.
generates a ton of awareness and interest and community and people around a software platform. And so looking at it through that lens, that's influenced a lot of what we do. And so now, we've got an event coming up where we're kind of deconstructing what is working best right now in the industry for launching a software platform and, kind of avoiding some of the mistakes and trials that we've seen and gone through.
So people should go to SaaS Launch Live to grab a ticket there. All right, Matt, we're coming to the end of the show. And one thing that you and I both really agree on is that business is not all of life, and that life should also have amazing moments and experiences. What is one item on Matt Deseno's personal bucket list you're going to accomplish in the next 12 months?
Ooh, in the next 12 months. That's great. So one thing that I have so much clarity about, a win in my life, is I want to raise kind, well-adjusted human beings who want to spend time with me when they no longer have to. And so if you got a little bit of my story there, the identity of father for me is a really meaningful, significant one. And so I'm a father to 2 boys, and that's like the biggest win in my life would be exactly that. So something that is a personal win that I'm doing over the next 12 months. I've got my oldest right now is going to be 3. He loves Sesame Street. I'm not even far, but in San Diego, they got like Sesame Place, Sesame World, Sesame, whatever it is. We're going there. So that like prioritizing, we get to travel a lot together. I spend a lot of time together. I block out a significant chunk of my day is being present with my kids. And so that is a personal win that I've articulated and we've planned for, is a significant moment that I know is going to be awesome for him. I don't know if this is going to be one of his oldest memories. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but we're going to continue doing stuff like this that are awesome and meaningful for him, because I want to make sure that I'm living in a way where, get to the end of my life and I'll say, you know what, I did. I raised kind, well-adjusted human beings who want to spend time with me when they no longer have to.
I love that. And I love that you already block a lot of that in, but that's still a big part of what your goals are going into the next year. Thank you so much for coming out on the show. To all of our listeners, to all of our Biz Ninjas, first thing, go follow Matt Deseno on Instagram, find him on all the socials, and do all of those fun things. Give the likes and hearts and loves. But to all my Biz Ninjas, wherever you're listening, watching, or streaming, it's your turn to go out and do something.